Through the morphine mist, you smiled, nodding forgiveness for our clumsy intrusions on your sleep and dignity. We marked each breath of your now ravaged, brittle body, accepting this was our last girly sleepover. We gently filed your fingernails that your cancer had force-fed into talons, then painted them a defiant purple. Suddenly, you awoke in a fight-or-flight panic. I held you up on your feet, with your head.
A Graceful Death is a collection of paintings of the end of life. It is a collection of paintings that travelled the country. It began with me painting the death of my partner in 2007 as he died from cancer, and my experience of trying to cope with the loss of him and the change in his body as the cancer destroyed him meant that I couldn't think of any other way to cope with the experience. So I painted him, and people found the paintings, which I hid in the studio because I thought they were very ghoulish, and I thought they would never speak to me again and think I was really very disreputable. And the exhibition started. They said, "Put this on, we need to see this. You're not the only one to be bereaved. We've been bereaved too. This is our story."
At first glance it seems a bit macabre and a bit negative to be painting people dying, but it's not about that at all. It's about the grace of dying. It's a subject that nobody wants to talk about, but it's a subject that everybody has to deal with at some point in their lives.
Basically, my wife took her own life 3 years ago, and most people at the time would have said none of us saw it coming, and that's absolutely true.
I was, beside myself really, angry, in denial. I thought she must have got it wrong. I was very frightened and in denial.
When I was first diagnosed, I was referred to the Haven Centre, which is a charity cancer centre, and somebody suggested, because I was so panicked and frightened and all that kind of stuff, I was told that it might be a good idea to go and see somebody and they might be able to help me. And they really did. Because
I'd experienced bereavement myself, and the exhibition really spoke to me.
It now tours the country, and I have more people involved who want to be painted, people's relatives or themselves at the end of their lives, which is a profoundly important part of the exhibition.
As an artist, she decided to paint Steve throughout his illness, even up until his dying day. Now a series of paintings called A Graceful Death is on display at St. Nicholas Church in Burnage. And I'm delighted to say that Antonia Rolls joins me in the studio.
When I heard that she was touring this exhibition around, I said, look, you really must come to Manchester, bring it to the Northwest. And here we are, 2.5 years on, and we're doing it.
Opening a discussion on what it means to die. What does it mean to die? What is this end of life thing? I paint people at the ends of their lives. I paint people who have survived terminal illness, which is not terminal anymore, and I paint people who have survived the bereavement process, so survivors as well.
I think it's a whirlwind of emotions, really. It's so hard to come to terms with that dreaded word, cancer. And
well, when I went in for my results, they said, okay, so you've got a grade 3, which is an aggressive cancer, but the good news is that it's been caught early, and it's estrogen-led or whatever, which is a good thing to have. What you do? Yeah, and so there were a few positive things, and so then they said, you've got to have an operation.
And just very fearful, because the recovery rates are good, they're getting better, and yet you still don't know. I think that's why I was explaining the other day. It's something you have to work at every day, because you can let it ruin the rest of your life if you allow it to consume you.
Our love story is done. It's time for you to sleep, and I won't leave until you go. Don't fear for me. Just sleep and gently let my fingers loose. It's time to go. Good night, my love. Good night.
A lot of people want to say something as they're dying. They want their truth to come out. They want to say, this, I am so-and-so, here's what I'm going to say. And the paintings are very truthful. I don't prettify them, and I don't make them worse. I just paint what I hope is what I see.
I kept my promises to wear red at your funeral and read your favourite poem. Your oldest girlfriends sobbed their identities from their safer hiding places on the back row. I can now forgive our selfish reluctance to accept your dying as well as you did. Slowly, we have learned to enjoy every
And
dance.
also, I am receiving a lot of poetry and prose from people, from members of the public, which I always display. I have a wall of words in the exhibitions, and these are poetry and words and whatever from people, which is extremely profound.
And one of the most difficult things for us to deal with as human beings is the fact that we are not immortal, that we are creatures with a span on Earth. And so even here, a place where week by week we talk about specifically the life, death and resurrection of Christ, even here people struggle sometimes.
What has surprised me is that I had 3 friends who've died within the last 15 months of terminal illness, 2 very gracefully really, and the other slightly less so, because he was very surprised about his diagnosis and it was quite complicated. And I'd expected all those deaths to be very much at the forefront of my mind, and they have to some extent. But what has surprised me is that my dad died 19 years ago of a heart attack, and so again not a graceful death because a very sudden and unexpected death, and it's brought back more emotions about that and the fact that I wasn't able to say goodbye to him than it has about the death that I'd expected it to evoke.
Yeah.
Does it achieve anything? Yes, it does. It achieves a huge amount because art, it seems that art, painting, poetry, writing, can touch places which people have kept locked for a long time. Mere conversation is very difficult to unlock someone who's hurting badly. It can happen and there can be tears, but to paint something, to undergo the whole process of being painted, bringing the subject into the public arena, creating a work of art and then showing it.
The humanity in the paintings, I mean, the one of the father, I mean, I was just really struck by that story of his daughter who didn't like him, but was there when he was dying and loved him.
What I'd also really like to show, and what really moved me, is the role that art has to play in dealing with these subjects. It's something that people don't really think of. Art isn't just pretty pictures. Art is something that stirs us and moves us and makes us think about things. And all the great films do that. All the great art does that. It looks at our humanity in a way that we might not have grasped ourselves.
Antonia, in producing this stuff, is extending my world. And that's what art does at its best. It opens up possibilities and it takes away fear and it encourages us. And so I find that, much as we're dealing with a very, very heavy subject here, I feel encouraged.
In your bed, you whispered, "Let's stay here, gone to earth forever." Your cold hand in mine now, with nothing to forgive, not a thing to regret. How could we have known then the storm was already coming to collect you?
And you can't help but be moved by the visual and, of course, the emotional images and the thoughts and the feelings that just well up from seeing this work. It's something very special.
And what we've got here is not going to be tidied away. So I really don't know how people will react. I mean, inevitably, churches are like wider society. You get a full range of views in any congregation. And I suspect there will some people who will come in tomorrow and go, oh my goodness, this is incredible, this is transformative. And there'll be some people who either will say, I'm not sure, or they might even say, I don't like it, I don't want it. And I suspect there may even be some people who don't come tomorrow because they're aware that this exhibition is on.
I don't want to provoke, but I don't want to just let this subject slide. When I'm showing the paintings at an exhibition, I always have 2 or 3 people with me to sit with people who need to talk, and invariably people need to cry. But the tears are not tears of helplessness and hopelessness and anger. There is a sort of cathartic effect.
This exhibition speaks to me as someone who's had to face their own mortality. And when I look at some of these images of Steve, I see a certain level of recognition. I mean, of course, I've been blessed and lucky in being able to, be well again. So speak to me at that level. They speak to me as someone who's a minister, because I've spent many occasions sat in hospices or hospitals with the dying.
I know what it felt like to be your husband, to be your friend, and to be your partner. And I know that for those 12 years we were together, I felt completely loved. More loved than I've ever felt in my life.
There were 2 ways I could go. I could either get really depressed and miserable and stay at home under my duvet and feel really sorry for myself with what had happened to me. Or I could just go, oh my God, this has actually made me realise I've got to live life, because I still have life, and I should just, really enjoy it and make the most of it. And so in that way it's quite brilliant, because I decided actually I wanted to live life, because even if I have, my life has been curtailed by whatever years or whatever, then at least I should make the best of this time.
Well then, I suppose, not sure really. I think you just need to have that inner peace really. I think if, as a Christian woman, death shouldn't be anything to fear really. It should be, I was once told, it's like walking out of the dining room into the kitchen. And if you can paint that in your head and think it's not the end.
When we are done and they see the pages of our life bound and nestling together, I want them to turn to each other and say, theirs was a good book. Such characters. What a story. Some will see the life and laughter, some the pain and death. Some will see God and love, but they'll all know a good book when they see one. And when I read our book, I want to read about all the laughter and all the pain, all the life and all the death, all the God and all the love, because a good book has it all.